Hello, everyone. Kelsey, founder of Komo. Welcome to today's interview with Kerrin Connolly. Kerrin has very graciously come on today to share her story and Brennan's story, who is her teenaged son. Before we hit record, we were literally just saying that 14 can be a tough age. 14 can be a bit of a hard age, eh, Kerrin?
Truth.
Truth, yeah. So, Kerrin, set the scene for us a little bit. Give us some background on your situation with Brennan, with his experiences with school, some of the challenges that you've been facing the last year or two.
Sure. Yeah, Brennan, well, like you said, he's 14, and historically, he's been a great student. Things kind of came easily to him, so we didn't maybe realize that there were some potential pitfalls ahead of us. And I think he started to show some cracks, I would say, about late 7th grade. And then 8th grade, and as we got into 9th grade, the curriculum got increasingly harder. He had to manage more classes, and so we started to see a little bit of crack in his armor, where things used to just come really easily. They were not coming easily anymore, and his grades started to show it. And we realized he wasn't really studying. Like, he didn't even know how to study because he never had to do it. Like I said, things just kind of came easily to him in elementary school, beginning of middle. And then we got to later middle and high school, and we realized we had a real problem. So, math was a particular struggle, which was interesting because he's always been pretty good at math. And we held him back from the accelerated classes once he started having some issues, and we got him a math tutor. But we started to realize it wasn't just math, right? It was really kind of a fundamental lack of knowing how to study and we couldn't get him a tutor for every subject. It was more basic than that. We needed to set the foundation for all of his classes, really.
Right. So, Kerrin, it really sounds like this was a case where that transition from middle school to high school really shone a light on the fact that here's this, if I'm understanding right, like here's this naturally bright kid who's doing great, and then things are getting harder. It's not coming so natural anymore. And it's starting to show as far as, and I guess this is my first question for you. You said that you guys started noticing that this is not just math, and that there is some foundation lacking here with respect to all of his classes, to school in general. Was it just grades, Kerrin, he was saying? Or were you actually like watching him try to study and realizing, oh my, he doesn't know what he's doing?
It was me trying to engage him. Once I saw his grades were slipping, and I said, okay, let's kind of do this together. Let me help you. Let's see where you maybe need some extra support, or maybe I can quiz you. And I realized, like you said, he really had no idea how to study. Like, do you have flashcards? Do you have any organizational systems set up? And he really had no idea. He would kind of read over his notes that the teacher had given him, and that's about all he had in his toolbox, which was fascinating.
So was this surprising to you? Like, had
Very.
you been thinking, tell us a bit more about that. Why do you think this came as a surprise?
I guess because I was always a good student and I knew how to study. I don't think anybody taught me how to study. I realize school's very different now than it was back then, and there's a lot of stuff online. And frankly, I don't know that I would have been as good learning from a PowerPoint or things like that. I had my books and my highlighters, and I took notes, and I think they do that less these days. And, my other two children will kind of go to their rooms, as would Brennan, and tell me they're studying. And I guess I assumed foolishly that that's what was happening, and that they had their own little routine down. And so I was a little blindsided. It's not like he wasn't, or I thought he was putting in time, and he still, and he was, he was putting in time, perhaps not enough time, but I also don't think he was being effective at all with that time. That's what kind of surprised me.
Right. Well, and I think that's even just such a great gem to highlight, is we hear so many students and even a lot of parents being like, I know they're trying. It's not like they're like refusing to do it. They're trying, but it's that whole, as we say, like that you can put in a bunch of effort and energy, but if it's not channeled through strategy, like you said, then it's not that effectiveness of actually achieving the goal that, studying, for example, is meant to achieve. It just doesn't really happen. You've got the time and energy expenditure without the good stuff on the other end of it that comes with the strategy.
A lot of
Okay.
busy work.
Yeah, a lot of busy work. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's so interesting. So how did obviously you saw this and you were concerned, rightly so. Was Brennan concerned though? Like, did he feel like I don't know how to do this right? Did he feel overwhelmed or did he feel like, yeah, I don't really know, but it's fine. I'll be fine. Like, what was towards it?
Well, as you know, Brennan's a man of few words. So he doesn't often share how he feels or what he thinks. But I won't say he was overwhelmed. I think he more tends to shut down a little bit. And he was frustrated, but not to the point, I don't know, he's a 14-year-old boy, not to the point where he was seeking answers, but I could tell he wasn't happy with his grades. He really didn't know why, because like I said, he'd always been very naturally bright in accelerated classes and all that kind of stuff. So he was dropped. He likes when he's in honors classes. So he was dropped down from honors Spanish. He was dropped down from accelerated math. He wanted to take this AP class that all of his friends were taking, and he signed up for it. And he started off the first quarter of the semester and he was failing, and he ended up dropping it, and he just couldn't keep up. And I could tell with that class he was frustrated because all of his friends were in it. He thought he should be able to keep up with it. He wanted to take it because it's kind of a badge of honor and something that colleges here look at to get an AP class or a bunch under your belt. And he dropped out. So I do think he started to notice, even though he wasn't necessarily verbalizing, I need help.
Mm-hmm. That's imagine how upsetting that is, especially when your friends are in that class too. That's a big one. Because you had mentioned that you had gotten tutors and that you had also tried to kind of work with him a little bit. Had he been open to that type of help before? I guess before his grades started dropping, it wasn't really, thinking that it needed to be on the table, but was he open to help? At what point did he become like, yes, I want tutors? Or was he the whole time being like, I don't want to have to need help?
He was open to the math tutor, but the math tutor consistently, interesting, said the same thing that Hiba says when Hiba's on with him.
That's what is it?
So, I think probably he agreed or felt like he needed outside help when he realized it was either me or somebody else. So he was open to our math tutor, but when I would say, okay, we're going to sit down and study, he would get frustrated with that. Like, I don't really want to study with you, because I think maybe he knew that it was giving me a peek behind his curtain, right? I was seeing that he wasn't getting a lot of this, and I was trying to hold him accountable and help him, but he probably didn't perceive it as that.
Our teens sometimes it doesn't land necessarily too, but okay. And so at this stage, if he's just, were you kind of the one more checking in with him being like, we need to take action to try to fix this? Or was he also kind of pushing that needle of like, I don't want it to be like this anymore? Like, who would you say was more kind of driving that initial bus of, we need to get some more help here?
I definitely presented it, but he was on board for sure. I mean, he recognized, like I said, I think especially when he got to high school and he tried to take that class and realized he didn't have, this class was a lot of reading, a lot of note taking, a lot of application. And I think he just realized he didn't have what he needed. So it was kind of it was just a prime opportunity for me to present it, because I had been looking for a while. I didn't know what the best avenue to take with him was. And so I'd been looking for something. And when I did present this to him, there was no pushback. He was definitely on board. Again, I don't think he really knew what he needed. He's 14. He's kind of like, wow, I'm not getting this, but I don't know why. I'm doing same thing I've always done, and I've always done fine. I don't know why this isn't working. So
totally. And so Kerrin, how did you find us? Because you mentioned the tutors, you had mentioned trying a couple of things. How did you come across Komo?
It was online, and I was searching for, so my daughter is in a class here called Avid, which is similar, and I don't know if you've heard of it,
I was
But
going to say a lot of our American families, I think, will know. Yeah.
it's a great program. And Brennan is not in it, but my younger daughter is. And so I just saw how she is, and she's got ADD. She's got inattentive ADD. So I saw how Avid was able to help her create a solution for herself. You know, she's got her calendar, she's got her binders, she's got everything organized, she's got her lists, she's got a very structured way that she approaches her studying, and Avid taught her that. So I was looking for something like that. And I found Komo, and I started reading through and listened to some parent testimonials and just reading that it wasn't just tutoring, which is not what I needed, but a fundamental basis for learning is what I needed. And so that's how I came across you online, by searching for that for you.
The magic of the internet. I love that.
Yes.
we connected through there.
Yep.
So Kerrin, we just we finished our 8 weeks together a couple weeks ago, maybe a few weeks ago. And in that time, like from when you, and actually I want to highlight something, Kerrin, that you said earlier for everybody watching. To be really, really clear, it's so important to understand this is not like what we do and just in general when it comes to learning how to learn and skill building and like actually for kids create sustainable change. They have to want to do it for themselves. It's not something that parents can do for them. It's not something we can do for them. They have to be open because they're the ones who have to do the work. And Kerrin, you mentioned that about creating your daughter for herself. And I just think I would be so remiss not to highlight that, because it's basically the prerequisite for any sort of improvement for everybody, not just our teenagers, like for in general with people. If you don't want to change something, like it's probably not going to happen as an adult,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So he was open because he's in this, like, I don't know what's up, but I definitely like can probably do better here if I learn stuff. So when he started his learning journey, what did you observe? Like from your perspective as mom, what did you see for him that was helpful? What were a couple of things that really moved the needle for him?
It took him a little bit to, I'd say the first couple of weeks he was still trying to figure out what all this was about. It was interesting to kind of watch the evolution, and he was super busy at the time. I'm sure you remember, Kelsey, he was playing 2 different sports and he just had a lot going on. He had practice and games 5 and 6 days a week. But what I did notice once he kind of figured out what the expectation was, that he really carved out that full 4 hours a week. He really tried his best to be on all 4 calls. And I heard from Nicole, you could see the evolution or hear the evolution in the updates, because I tried to stay out of it, right? I made sure he was set up. I made sure that he remembered, even though he's really good. He put it all on his calendar, and it got to the point where I didn't have to remind him at all after about a week. And really that was probably more for me than him. I was probably just checking in because he did, like I said, he had it on his calendar. But he really carved out that time, and he came prepared. He knew what he was going to work on. Even if he didn't have math or science that week, he would still go to the math and science call, and he would work on his Spanish or whatever it was. So I think one of the biggest things for him is that he just carved out time for himself to actually apply these lessons, do the work. And if he didn't have any homework that day, he would work on a Komo lesson. So I think that time that he carved out for himself and made sure, like I said, that he came prepared with something to work on. Didn't have to be anything in particular, but he knew at the very least he'd work on the Komo curriculum. I think that was very helpful. And the math and science, I think, was great for him. The math and science room. Like I mentioned earlier, we had a tutor for about a year for both of my sons. And the tutor always said that my other son worked harder, but he wasn't as naturally gifted in math, gifted in other things, but that Brennan was pretty gifted in math and kind of took the easy way and didn't work through all the steps as he should. And so I think that the math and science room was very helpful for him. And I saw him really starting to do a whole lot better in math because he heard that from another external person, not his mother. You're skipping the steps. You need to write all the steps out. You need to do this, in a sequential fashion. And so that was a big improvement that I saw.
That's huge. And you know what, Kerrin, I'm trying to think here. I'm not sure if I've ever heard that piece about the carving out time. So on the one hand, it's so of course, but it's literally the prerequisite for like everything else for him to have proactively really just decided like, I'm going to show up for myself. I will take this time. I will commit, and I will do this for, you know, this duration. Was he, I have to ask, because I know a lot of parents out here are probably thinking 4 calls a week, like what kind of sorcery do you have to do to get your kid to commit to this? Was he on for himself? And if so, what do you think contributed to that? Or were you more like, all right, Brennan, like, let's go, you've got your calls?
No, I didn't. I didn't push him at all. And I was, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit surprised at that. He knew that he had these 4 calls a week. I think I think that he started to feel good about the fact that he was getting all of his work done, and that he had this support on the line, and that he could run things by somebody else. And you know, a lot of the stuff they do independently, and then they check. But you know, I think that was the biggest, and I don't really know how to answer your question, but I do think that was one of the biggest things for him, is really just knowing that he had to be accountable to at least that 4 hours a week and sit down and do the work. It was almost maybe a relief for him, right? To not have to figure out where to fit it in. It was like, okay, these are the 4 hours that I'm going to do my work this week. And that was plenty for him to accomplish. And, you know, like I said, he's got all A's and B's right now. So,
which is fantastic. His grades were lower. Do you mind
sharing? His grades were lower first semester for sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all A's and B's. Good for him. I just want to like give him a high five, which anytime I say that, I know kids are like, please don't say that. But yes, that's fantastic accomplishment for him.
I'm thrilled for him. And I know it's got to feel good, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's honestly, Kerrin, I'm so happy you said that. Like, that's such a fantastic answer, because it's something that we talk about a lot on our end as the educators, because we see, you know, we work with every single week, we're working with students who come in, and we do definitely have some high achievers who are getting 90s and who are just really wanting to, you know, their potential essentially, right? Maybe they want scholarships, they want to go to Harvard, whatever. Come to us, and they've exactly like you just shared about Brennan, like they've been struggling. They don't necessarily understand why. A lot of our kids have struggled for so long that they're just like, I don't think anything will work if they've done tutoring or counseling or like a lot of other interventions, but they've just never gotten those foundations. So that whole piece about how good it can, when they start to actually realize like either, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, or, oh, I can do this. Or I don't know if Brennan ever got on the no homework weekend train, but a lot of our kids love, like, I can literally get all of my stuff done in, like you said, those 4 hours, and then I'm home free.
Yep.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay. Yep. I love that. Was there anything as far as within those times, anything come to mind for you as far as any strategies or tools or skills that for him helped with A, feeling better, but B, like driving those grades up, even with, you know, having the buy-in for accountability? Was there anything in specific that stood out to you? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so no worries if nothing comes to mind, but if it does.
No, I do think the accountability, and Nicole always mentioned that, right? He knew that he was accountable. I mean, to me, to himself, and to the call, that he had to come prepared. He had to come with something to work on. I do think the accountability was a big piece of it. I also think that getting in the routine, like I do every day, of checking your email and checking your calendar. And that took a little bit longer, because we'd be about 3 weeks in and I'd say, okay, you know, Nicole said something or Kelsey said something. And he's like, oh, where? And I'm like, you have to check your email every day. They send you emails and I'm copied on them. So that was helpful. I think getting into a routine, and, you know, there's some arguments there about probably kids don't need another distraction and checking an email every morning, but that's what we do as functioning adults. And that's what keeps us in communication. And so his teachers communicate through email, and he does. He needs to get into that routine of checking email. And the calendar was huge. He's never used a calendar. He's never looked at his Google Calendar. So actually having to put assignments on there and breaking them down and holding himself accountable to the interim steps. I think that's still a work in progress. I do think he puts the end goal, the test, the project on his calendar, but breaking it down and holding to his own timelines is still a work in progress.
Yeah. And good thing he's got lots of runway as far as the rest of high school for practicing.
Yes.
And dialing that in. And I think too, and I know you and I have talked about this offline, not recording, but I just want to highlight for everybody watching. So we work together for 8 weeks. That's the length of our program, at least. And we get a lot done in those 8 weeks. It's, foundations, everything that your kids need to learn how to learn. But to Kerrin's point, like some students, they take those 8 weeks and they understand all the moving pieces are more or less dialed in. And then it's just about strengthening that foundation. A lot of students, everything is brand spanking new. And by the end of the 8 weeks, they've got some pieces locked in and others are still floating around that they have to figure out how to actually dial in more and incorporate it so that it's a routine, so that it's like second nature. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that when they have that, at least, and then time and space. And if your kid is like about to graduate high school, I don't want you freaking out. There's always runway. It's never these skills or these tools, right? They're always helpful. But Kerrin, I just think that's such an important highlight. You get the foundation. It's not like a magic and then you're perfect and you have everything dialed in. It's just like us for habit formation, right? It can take some time. And again, with our 14-year-olds, sometimes require more buy-in as they mature, as they get older, as they want different things for themselves.
And the beauty of this is that, well, a few things, as we talked offline too, is patience is not my strong suit. So I kind of wanted him to have everything, right? All right, why don't we have this down yet? Why don't we have this down yet? So Nicole advised me to just be patient, which I'm working on. And I get now it's a lot of information. It's a lot to implement, but that is the two nice pieces of it is he saw how well he functioned in those 8 weeks. He saw how well it worked when he was working through the curriculum and carving out the time for himself and holding himself accountable on the calendar. So now we've been off for a few weeks and I think he's waffling, transitioning, but he's 14. And the good news is he has all of those tools available to him when he is ready and he says, okay, I remember how well I was doing then. Let me go back and see what it was about that and what I need to brush up on to do that well now. So I'm hopeful, like you said, as his brain matures, he's still young, that as he goes through his high school journey, he'll continue to implement more and more.
Totally. That's a huge part of the goal and really for the lifelong learning piece. And then Kerrin too, because you mentioned you're not the most patient, but you've been working on it. Let's talk about your experience, parent perspective here. You mentioned about stepping back. Can you just speak a little bit about what was that like for you? Like, did you kind of step back all at once? Like clandestinely still checking all of his assignments every day in the background? How was it for you to see him going through this journey? What was your journey like?
Yeah, it was maybe a little bit of both. At the beginning, I was definitely still checking, but I think as we both ramped up, I stood back. I think it was a relief for both of us, to be honest with you. He was relieved to have that carve out time and the accountability. I really think he was. Brennan actually works well under structure. And I think that set up a structure for him that allowed him to succeed. For me, as I trusted that I didn't need to remind him about the phone calls, and I knew that he was going to those 4 hours a week, and I saw his grades coming in because I get pinged every time he gets a new grade. So I didn't even have to go in and check. But there are some things that you still, like if he has missing assignments, you won't necessarily know about that. But he didn't have any of those because he would come to the call and he would review what he had due for the week. And there would be conversation if things were outstanding and how to get that, finished. So it was really nice for me. It was nice to get on the parent calls and hear a lot of similar conversations and get some, potential strategies, which was great. There's a lot of similarities in what we're all struggling with. So it's nice to know you're not alone. But it was, for me personally, it was a relief is the easiest way to put it. Honestly, I knew he was working. I knew he was accountable. I knew he felt good about his grades, and it freed up us to for me not to hound him every day when he came home about what he had due.
You just put that so simply. I want to clip that out and just send that out of just XYZ. And so then we had these other things that were good. Yeah. I want to just highlight something you shared about, you said it's nice to know that you're not alone with these things. How, because I feel like, obviously everybody's different. Every parent is different. I know some parents feel like they've been having the weight of the world on their shoulders about like, why haven't I been able to help my kid? Others come in being like, I have a lot of friends, with kids going through similar things.
Yeah.
For you, was it, and just sorry for audience, we do our parent calls each week where all the parents come together, and that's the parent time and space to connect and talk over challenges and like crowdsource and get, some coaching and some support. But Kerrin, before that, like, which camp were you in, more of like feeling a bit isolated, feeling a bit like, are other parents going through this? Or did you kind of already have like a network of, this is fairly normal, or at least I know that, this is happening for others?
I think that people tend to be a little private when it comes to their challenges. I'm not necessarily. So I think that I felt as though I was the only one dealing with this, because like I said, I have two other kids who kind of stayed on par, right? They've kind of they've been very stable throughout their school careers. Brennan has kind of been up and down and all over the place. So I did feel like everybody else's kids were just breezing through. Like I said, he was taking that AP class, and a lot of my friends' kids were taking that AP class, and they were still taking it. And we were kind of like, I'm thinking in my head, well, why can't you take it? You wanted to, and now you're dropping out, you're failing. Why are you failing? All these other kids are not failing. So I think I was in a little bit of that camp until I started talking about it. As I was seeking out, that's what I do a lot, like talk to my friends, like what will help? When I was seeking you out, frankly. But there are a lot of kids struggling out there that once I opened up about it, they were like, oh yeah, my kid too. Oh, we're failing 4 classes, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's not just me. I'm only talking to the parents whose kids breeze through school. I need to be talking to the other people. So, I think they're both out there, but I am definitely not in the camp of everybody's struggling, but everybody is on some level, but I don't think that anybody advertises it.
That I feel like that is a life lesson there.
Right.
You see those memes sometimes with like, you never know what somebody else is going through. Like, be kind. Like you just never do. I love that principle of reciprocity too. Of like that. And I won't go off on a tangent about this. That's not the time or place, but we talk a lot about like vulnerability as the starting, and how a lot of students, there's so much shame and stigma that can accompany struggles, or that can accompany that feeling of like, why aren't I smart? A lot of kids think, why aren't I smart enough? Even though obviously that's not the case, right? You can't do something you don't know how to do. It's hard. Yeah. But to even have that vulnerability to share openly in the first place, to be able to then learn and like get perspectives about what's actually going on, and to be able to feel, that type of, I don't know what you want to call it, connection or community or validation, right?
For sure. When I struggle, I reach out, right? So that, yes, you have to. But I do, school's so different now than it was for me. Anyway, it's so different. I look at how my kids are expected to learn, and the standards and how I feel like sometimes they're just kind of pulled along instead of really understanding the content. It's just about, learning and testing. And it's different. It's different. And I think I would feel inadequate if I were going to school right now. And I was a really good student. So I just think my kids keep telling me, and I didn't believe them for a long time. It's different, Mom. It's different. But I really truly believe that it is.
Yeah, that's so true. That's got to be one of the top 3 or 4 sayings, I think, from teens. And the thing is, especially these days, like 10 years ago, and I feel like very old even talking about this, but in the last few years, it really has been, and outside of even forget about COVID, like it's just been such an explosion of difference. And I think in a lot of ways of different values, even with respect to how like we're delivering education. And Kerrin, what you mentioned about the test, I have a question. Like, did you feel in your experience, especially with Brennan, is it that he was more being taught to the test as far as like a test, or taught to like national standardized tests, or both?
like a nationally standardized test. And there's a lot of, like I said, I guess and I think there's some science behind this, right? There's some science behind taking notes and highlighting things and writing things on a page. And it's just how I learned. And I had to get, through to my own head that that's not how everybody learns. But I do think it's hard to solidify a concept if you're just watching a PowerPoint about it. And I'm not saying that teachers aren't teaching, they're certainly teaching, but it's a different style of teaching now. There's not a lot of note taking and writing. It's observing a presentation on a computer, and a lot of times some pre-printed notes. So if I'm not writing this down myself, I'm not imprinting it on my brain. So it's interesting, it's different. And I think it's harder. For me, it would be harder.
It's definitely harder. And I want to highlight too, and this is, I love teachers. We work close. I have teachers on my team. We partner with teachers, but also teaching is different than learning. And teachers have 20 or 30 kids in a class, and they're superheroes for what they do with differentiated instruction. Yeah, but it's impossible. Exactly. And I think this kind of brings it full circle, going back to like Brennan even being open to wanting to learn, because you can have the best teacher, the best tutor on the planet, teaching. But if the student is not equipped with the capacity, it goes out the window. It's not going to, they're never going to do as well or feel as good as they otherwise could. And it's not about the teaching, it's about the student learning.
And, it's also, you're right. I don't know how they teach to 30 kids who have different levels of understanding, different ways of understanding, different levels of support. So that's why I said they have to kind of pull them all along and teach to the standardized test, because unfortunately, that's a lot of what they're being held to now, which anyway, we could have a whole other conversation.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, this could be like a podcast episode unto itself. We digress, but no, it's true. Teachers, we love you. You do an incredible job. And then it's just, you have to student, that is the job. It's curriculum delivery and supporting students the best you can. But students who know how are so much better positioned to take that and run with it. So Kerrin, just one more question for you here. What advice would you give to parents who are struggling right now, who are watching their kids struggle, who are, kind of in the thick of a bad time right now, and it's on what you've learned and what you've seen? What would you tell them?
What would I tell them? I think there's hope. I do think that we as parents probably don't know any better. We default to, well, at least I didn't. I won't speak for everybody. We default to tutoring, right? Individual tutoring. Oh, you're struggling in language arts. Let me get you a tutor for that. Oh, you have a reading comprehension issue. Let me get you a tutor for that. Math, same thing. But I do think there is a fundamental, again, I've said it 4 times on this call now, I do think learning and teaching has changed. And I don't know that kids, or at least my kids, I don't feel like we're necessarily given, and maybe this is my mistake, they weren't given a fundamental structure. Like maybe I should have sat down with them when they were little and said, this is how you need to organize yourself. This is how you need to structure. I think we think that it will come naturally when they have all this information coming at them, and they're going to organize it the way they feel is appropriate. But some kids, frankly, just don't know how to do that. They don't even know where to begin. And it can be incredibly overwhelming, and they shut down. And, like Brennan just started to be like, oh, well, like this is kind of what my grades are now. This is how high school is going to be. And just knowing how he'd been in the past specifically, I wasn't willing to accept it. I'm glad he wasn't willing to accept it. So I think that just searching out whatever the fundamental issue is, which I don't think is just subject by subject. I think there's some real underpinnings that need to be taught. And so I would say just take a chance. Don't give up hope. It's great to see him achieving again and feel good about achieving again, which gives me hope that even, like I said, he doesn't have all these strategies down. He's not even close to having all these strategies down, but he knows now that if he does implement them, because he has for a good 6 to 8 weeks, that he will succeed because he's got good grades. And he was frankly very relaxed. He had the busiest schedule that he has had in a long time between school and practice and games, and he still got all A's and B's. And that was not the case. That was not the case last semester. So, yeah, I wish I could give better advice than that, but don't give up hope. I mean, there is some fundamental learning that can happen that can, I think, improve anybody's educational experience.
Totally. Kerrin, I don't know, maybe it's just me and I'm a little bit biased, obviously, because you're wonderful and such a super mom, but that is, I think, fantastic advice that absolutely every parent should hear, that it doesn't matter what the situation is, it doesn't matter how long they've struggled, it doesn't matter, maybe they have learning differences, like there can be all going on, your kids can still learn. It is one of the coolest things about how our brains work. So I just, that is fantastic advice. And I also want to just note, I don't think it's parents' quote unquote faults, as far as the total assumption is that school takes care of these things and that kids will learn as they go and that they'll figure it out as they go. And skills, it's not my saying, it's a saying I found that I love, skills are built, not born. Your kids packaged with these things that they can just flip on overnight and activate because they're needed. They have to learn them. If nobody teaches them, they're not going to just like magically appear. So no, your parents, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just the way that the system is right now. But anyway, Kerrin, that is fantastic advice. That is it for us today. Kerrin, thank you so much for your time, for coming on and for sharing your story. We really appreciate it. And for everybody else, we will catch you on our next interview. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Kelsey.